UFC Fight Night Nicolau vs Pearce has just taken place this weekend, and in this video I'll be giving you a recap of the whole entire card as well as the best moments from it. Kicking off the recap with the first fight of the card that we had was Gabriel Benitez versus Maheshate. Now, first things first, with this fight, it was more competitive than I thought it was going to be. I thought Maheshate was going to secure that second round TKO just by being more lengthy, more powerful, a lot younger, tougher chin. There was a lot of factors into it where I thought it was going to be a TKO. But when it comes to Benitez, he was finding a lot of success off his left hand, especially countering Maheshate when he was coming forward. Maheshate was utilizing a lot of forward pressure, but I think that Benitez early on was able to really find his range, and his best weapon in the fight was definitely his inside leg kick. It was completely disrupting the flow of Maheshate trying to get combinations off, and to Machete's credit, he did land a few good counter strikes and was towards the end of the round was slowly starting to find his range a bit. Overall, I think they both managed distance well in the fight, but Maheshate was just controlling the cage pretty much for the whole entire 15 minutes. And an issue that I had with Maheshate in this fight is he had non-existent head movement. When he was pressing forward, Benitez was just capitalizing. That he just headshot after headshot because his head was just not going anywhere. So there was a lot. That is in part why there was so much volume accumulated in this fight. It's just both of them weren't exactly defending well, but they were utilizing their range well to get their shots off. We can easily say both of them showed good chins. Neither of them got a knockdown in this fight. A very high output fight. Good fight to kick off the first fight of the night. I do think that this is controversial though. I honestly would have given the first and the third round to Benitez. In all honesty, I think Benitez actually took the fight 29-28. He outstruck him overall by about 30 strikes, and yeah, he just had a bit more well-roundedness to his game. Outstruck him by leg kicks by about 23 kicks. Was quite surprised that Maheshate did get that split decision. Moving up the card, Liang versus Ivana Petrovic. Now, I will say, Liang actually did have a decent first round. She secured the takedown and she was outstriking Ivana as well. She had a lot of success with the overhand. When Ivana was coming in, she would kind of have like a bit of a check overhand, a counter overhand that was actually landing a fair bit of the time. And I think just being early off the mark in terms of using her flurries, she was putting Ivana on the back foot a bit because she was just so aggressive in that first round. Yes, Liang did have a fair bit of success in the striking department, but what Petrovic did so well is that she initiated her own wrestling, her own takedowns, and then was able to land that really nice ground and pound, which eventually in that third round then opened up and led to that arm triangle finish. A big cause of that is Liang just completely gassed herself out from the first to the second round, and it was completely evident right up into that third round. Overall, it was a pretty good finish for Ivana Petrovic, and I think Liang does get cut now. 4-fight losing streak, all by finish in the UFC. It's going to be hard to see any form of extension in contract or anything there. I just don't think it's the right level for her at this point. Next fight up the card, James Llontop versus Chris Padilla. First loss on the predictions for me. And to be fair, Padilla just came out very explosively, had very good level changes. And that was the real sway in that fight, was how good his ground game was in the submission sense. Now, when it comes to the wrestling sense in terms of overall control, Padilla did show some holes in that game. He didn't utilize his legs to actually control Llontop, which then allowed Llontop to get his legs out from underneath him, and he was then able to get up. Now, to be fair, I will say that Llontop, he was very composed and he was able to get up straight away because of that. But the ground game was just so far in Chris Padilla's favor. He was just very, in terms of those submission transitions, just the transitions in general, he was way ahead of the game. Llontop was finding success with the leg kicks, and as I predicted, Padilla just doesn't check the kicks. He landed 10 out of 11 leg kicks on Padilla, and he was getting the better of him on the feet. However, Llontop was just too impatient with getting up. I think to be fair, he probably just had that confidence in that, okay, I got up a couple of times before very easily with no repercussions, no consequences, so I'm going to get up again and it'll be fine. However, in this point, I think Padilla had made those adjustments and then saw that in those get-ups beforehand, Padilla was not protecting his neck. So he utilized his great transition skills and then took the back, and he sunk in the rear naked choke very tight, very quickly. Overall, it was a great win for Padilla, and especially on short notice, so you got to give him that one. And he broke the 12 fight win streak of Llontop. Moving up the card, Marnic Mann versus Ketlen Souza. Souza was just applying a lot of pressure throughout that whole entire fight, and kind of looking at how Maheshate fought, same with Mann, no head movement whatsoever. And she was, with no head movement, she was just getting pieced up and just did not look comfortable at all on the feet. I will say she did show some decent takedowns in the third round, but it was just overall one-sided, especially in that striking department, and Souza just is clearly levels above her. So it was, yeah, very good win for Souza, very one-sided. Moving up, Dontel Mays versus Caio Machado. Now, when it comes to Dontel, he was finding a lot of success with that lead uppercut and the straight that followed it, that 5-2 combo that he was using. He utilized it not only to land, but he was covering a lot of distance with it, which that 3-inch reach advantage is where that's really going to come into play. And he had a very good first round overall. I mean, he dropped Machado with a check right hook as well. It was a clear first round for him. And the fight was just kept at range. So that, as I said, that 3-inch reach advantage was really an advantage for Mays. Machado just didn't close the distance, and he realistically, in that fight, he needed to make it a brawl, especially the more the fight went on, and especially after he got dropped. It was a close fight overall, though. Machado was a bit more active in the third round, but as I said in the prediction video, he's just too passive, and he let that fight slip away just like he let the Parkin fight slip away. So it's a fair underdog win for Dontel Mays. Moving up, Michal Figlak versus Austin Hubbard. Now, first things first with this fight, I am surprised with Figlak. He did show a lot of patience in this fight. Compared to his fight with Ziam, is the polar opposite of fighting styles. Against Ziam, he was just balls to the wall, just trying to take his head off. And in this fight, he was a lot more calm, a lot more calculated, while still being able to utilize forward pressure. He picked his shots very well, and with that forward pressure, he was putting Hubbard on the back foot, which you could tell Hubbard wasn't comfortable. But on the flip side, when Hubbard was pressuring forward, Figlak wasn't comfortable either. Hubbard did land well to the body, and overall it was very evenly matched throughout the whole entire fight. When it came to the feet, whoever had the other on the back foot was winning those striking exchanges overall, which it was very back and forth. Hubbard landed well to the body, but overall it was a very evenly matched fight. Whoever had the other person on the back foot was winning any of those striking exchanges. But I do think that this is a controversial decision. I think Hubbard needed to be more active with the takedowns. I think if he was able to utilize those takedowns, he would have got a more decisive win. And I think Figlak overall was just more successful on the feet. He outlanded him. He was more composed, and obviously showing more composure than the Ziam fight. And I honestly think that if I was scoring it, I would have had it 29-28 to Figlak, with Austin taking that second round. Moving on up the card to the feature prelim fight, Rani Yahya versus Victor Henry. Now, I will say, got to give Yahya credit. Just like Benitez, he was doing better than I thought. Especially in that first round, he was mixing it up on the feet pretty well. And he did have some pretty fast level changes, but Henry was just so dominant. I mean, he just stuffed all of Yahya's takedowns pretty easily, out-muscled him as well. I knew that age factor was going to come in. Yahya's just not the same in terms of his strength, his speed, and it was very evident in this fight. And when we were getting further into the fight, we obviously saw the stamina issue as well, which was definitely down to Victor Henry's crippling body shots. And as the fight went on, Yahya was just reaching for his shots. I mean, they were playing into Henry's reach game, not Yahya's. And Henry, with his boxing, was just countering so effectively, using great shot selection, ripping the body. When the hands would come down, up top, hitting the head. It was very, very clean boxing. And after the first round, Henry was just tearing Yahya apart. I mean, especially with the liver shots. And as I said, with that shot selection, it was just a flawless performance. I mean, he was going head, body, legs, consistently stuffing the takedowns. It honestly, just a completely flawless performance. Moving up to the first fight on the main card, Tim Means versus Uros Medic. Now, this is obviously a quick one to analyze. Fantastic takedown defense from Medic. Stuffed all 3 of Tim Means' takedowns, and Means just didn't have any answers for him. As I said in the predictions, the takedown offense of Means just isn't really there. And Medic just with that power, and Means with his age and how much damage he's taken over time. That uppercut that Medic hit him with was just flawless. Again, just like Victor Henry, an absolute flawless performance from Uros Medic. Moving up the card, Jonathan Pearce versus David Onama. Now, this is a bit of a frustrating result for me. First of all, we got Onama missing weight by 2.5 pounds. And then when we look at it statistically, Pearce outlanded him 2 rounds to 1. Had almost double the control time that Onama had as well, and was more active in securing those takedowns in the first round as well as outstriking him anyway. Then when we look at the second round, Pearce dominated using his wrestling. He was just relentless and outpositioned Onama pretty much the whole entire round and controlled his back for the most of it. Now, I will say for Onama, his gas tank is getting pretty good. Obviously, missing that 2.5 pounds, it's hard to say whether the gas tank is going to be affected or not. Depends on whether he was struggling to make weight or there was just some miscalculation in camp to where he just didn't make weight. As I said, his gas tank is getting pretty good. I mean, we've seen it against Nate Landwehr. Now we're seeing it against Jonathan Pearce, who's a wrestler. And I think that training at elevation has definitely been working for him. He used 5 explosive reversals throughout the fight, and he didn't really gas at all, which exploding the way he did is very impressive. To be able to keep up with that, to keep up with the relentless wrestling of Jonathan Pearce, and to explode out of those disadvantageous wrestling positions that Jonathan Pearce had him in. When it comes to that fight overall, though, honestly, I had it 2-0 going into the third for Pearce. I think it was a 29-28 unanimous. It should have been a 29-28 unanimous. Onama definitely took that third round. I think that's completely fair, but yeah, I honestly think that Jonathan Pearce had that fight. Moving up, Austin Lane versus Jhonata Diniz. Now, look, the commentary said it was Jhonata, so we're going to run with Jhonata. Hopefully I didn't butcher it. We're just going to go with it. But anyway, when it comes to Austin, he was very smart in driving through with his takedowns early in the first round. As I said in the predictions, the takedowns in the ground game was going to be his best, if not his only chance of really winning the fight. Jhonata Diniz is just a much higher caliber striker, world champion kickboxer, Muay Thai, just, yeah, very decorated in that realm, which a former footballer is just not going to be able to keep up with. He just doesn't have the time in the sport for that pedigree of fighter. Obviously, Austin Lane took that first round, which is very impressive. Didn't get finished in the first like I thought he would, and like literally all of Deniz's opponents have been as well. But in round 2, I mean, Diniz just weathered the storm, and it was his round to take. I mean, Austin was just so gassed from all those takedown attempts. And when it comes to the finishing sequence, I mean, Diniz was so technically sound. He faked the right hand, hit up with a nice uppercut, and then finished with that left hook. I mean, it was just a very nice, clean finish for him, and it's just going to land him another opponent, which is going to put him up in those rankings. But, I mean, when we look at that first round, though, Diniz does really need to work on that ground game. I mean, he had so many opportunities to push off Austin's hips, and he just didn't utilize it at all. So, very dangerous striker, but needs that ground game work. Moving up the card, Ariane Lipski, or De Silva, versus Karine Silva. Now, both were very good defensively on the ground in the first round. It was a very passive fight. I mean, both of them only stayed at kicking range. But Ariane de Silva needed more pressure. She needed to, just like Machado, she really needed to make it a bit more of a dogfight to secure that last round at least, because it was pretty much just dragged away from her from the ground control from Karine Silva. So a good fight for Karine Silva in the sense of having that decision experience, because I mean she's finished so many fights, so it's good that her cardio was in check. But yeah, moving forward, she's going to be a top 5, top 10 problem. Moving up to the co-main event, we had Ryan Spann versus Bogdan Guskov. Now, in round 1, Guskov was definitely having trouble with that ground game of Spann. He made it harder for himself, which is understandable, to defend the takedowns because his hands were so high, but it makes sense because of Spann's power and his reach advantage over Bogdan. So in terms of stuffing those takedowns, he did have to fight a lot more to actually stuff them, which he did end up stuffing 2 of them out of the 3. But yeah, just in terms of that one instance that Ryan actually was able to secure that takedown, he stole the round with that takedown. Going into the second round, Guskov did eat a few of those strikes, a few good 1-2s, a few good other strikes from Ryan Spann. But Bogdan was just so accurate with his boxing, and when he landed that clean uppercut, Spann was just on skates. And I think Spann did get a bit gassed out from that wrestling in the first round as well. And you could tell he just started whiffing up until that point. Up until he got hit with that uppercut, he was whiffing his shots. He did look pretty exhausted. And the biggest issue against a fighter like Bogdan is that, I mean, he's got that ridiculous KO power, especially through that ground and pound. But to keep that at bay, Ryan Spann did not utilize his best weapon enough, which is his 1-2. I mean, we've seen his 1-2 before, as I stated in the predictions, absolutely sent Dominic Reyes to the bloody shadow realm with it. He just needed to utilize that a lot more, and Spann just started playing into Guskov's game. I mean, his fight IQ just kind of went out the window when it came to that exhaustion, and as soon as they started trading, it was pretty much over. Moving up to the main event, we had Matheus Nicolau versus Alex Perez. Now, the fight was just a fast kickboxing pace fight. I mean, in the first round, Perez was mixing up his striking very well, but Nicolau, I mean, as Nicolau is in his fights, most of his fights, very crisp hand speed, crisp counter striking, and he did get Perez with a nice check left hook in the first round, but ultimately Perez just took the round over out of volume, and Perez had good leg kicks too. I mean, Perez tagged Nicolau with a nice counter right, pressured him, and caught him with a clean right hook. I mean, his striking accuracy, his versatility in this fight was amazing. Ultimately, when it does come to Nicolau, I'm a bit concerned about him. I mean, I just don't think his chin is going to be the same after Royval finished him with that brutal knee, in all honesty. But aside from Nicolau, I mean, obviously looking at Alex as the winner, I mean, it looks super sharp. And it'll be good seeing him move up the division, especially if he keeps mixing up his striking like that. If he continues to mix up his striking like that, I mean, going legs, body, head, using a lot of movement, honestly, he can find some success higher up in those rankings. Now, moving up to the Fight Card Awards, when we look at the fighter to watch, I would have said Chris Padilla, but I think we need to see him against more ground game experts to get a good gist of his actual ground game level. So I'm honestly going to go with Perez. I think he just had an amazing performance, and he said he had issues in his camp against Mikhaev as well. And he said that this camp was better. Obviously, a lot of people could definitely just say that if they've lost the fight and then they say their camp had issues and then they won the fight and then they say that camp is better. Obviously, they can make that statement. But, I mean, aside from that, if it is true, we've just seen the levels there. I mean, it's either Mikhaev is that good or, I mean, Nicolau's chin's just expired, or Perez is just that improved from that camp to this camp. And, I mean, if he can just keep putting up performances like that, I mean, he's just going to shoot up those rankings and possibly get a title shot there. He just needs to trust himself more on the ground and then let his hands work. So he's more confident on the feet, and he doesn't have to worry so much about that ground game. He is pretty good defensively on the ground game. We saw that against Mikhaev. So if he can trust in himself, if it does go to the ground, just let his hands go like he did in this fight. I mean, he's going to find success if he does it the way he did it in this fight. Now, when we look at finish of the night, I've got to go with Uros Medic's uppercut. I mean, fastest finish on the card, was the cleanest finish without taking pretty much any damage as well. It's, yeah, definitely going to put Uros Medic on notice. I mean, he's already one of those fighters that are just a finishing machine. I mean, he's never been to a decision, so it's just going to be definitely fascinating to see where he goes next. Moving on to the top 3 best card moments. Now, when we look at number 3, this is a bit of an interesting one because Joe Martinez, the announcer, his voice, I just started noticing in the Karine Silva and Ariane de Silva fight that his voice was getting really scratchy on the announcements. And then I was thinking, I'm like, I don't know if he's going to be able to finish the whole entire fight card with his voice like this. And then Charlie Arnold comes out and does the announcement for the end of that fight and for Spann versus Guskov as well. So it's pretty neat. I mean, she's now officially the first ever female ring announcer in UFC history and actually wasn't too bad. Moving up to number 2, got to give it to Perez's right hook finish. I mean, super important win to get back on track towards that title shot. And it also just puts the division on notice with a KO against a high-ranked opponent like Nicolau and being able to flatline him like that. It's very impressive, and you know, it's gonna be really beneficial for Alex Perez mentally after losing to Mikhaev in a frustrating manner like that. So yeah, it's just I'm hoping it switches his momentum. And to the best moment of the card, I'm giving it to Uros Medic with that uppercut. I think it was the best shot of the night. He looked extremely confident in that fight. And when it comes to just like Alex Perez against Mikhaev, when Uros Medic had that frustrating fight in that wrestling department against Miktabek Oralby, I mean, it's just a nice change of pace for him to get back in that winning column, especially with such a brutal KO, just like Perez, and just for Medic as well. It's just going to be very important for him moving forward, and it's going to be great to see who he gets matched up with moving forward. I hope you enjoyed this Fight Night recap video, and please like, comment, subscribe for more MMA content just like this.